Learn ASP.NET Web API in 7 days. Course Introduction. There are 8 sections in this course as listed below. Section 1 Getting Started. Section 2 Creating Web API Applications. Section 3 Web API and Routing. Section 4 Web API Formators. Section 5 Testing and Debugging. Section 6 Deployment and Hosting. Section 7 Advanced Topics. Section 8 Learning Quiz. Section 1 has 5 lectures and a before we begin quiz. Lecture 1, the introduction which you're going through. Next, we have Quiz 1, before we begin quiz. This quiz will help you in testing your existing knowledge. You should try this, although you are free to skip it if you want. Lecture 2, basic requirements for the course. In this lecture we will explain the basic requirements. Lecture 3, installing SQL Server Express 2014. In this lecture you will see how to install SQL Server Express. Lecture 4, how to install Visual Studio 2017. This lecture will help you in understanding Visual Studio installation steps. Lecture 5, ASP.NET Web API Getting Started. In this lecture the basics of Web API are explained. Section 2 has 5 lectures and a quiz. Lecture 6, Creating an ASP.NET Web API Service and with API Method Overloading. This lecture will explain how to do API Method Overloading. Lecture 7, What are CRUD operations? This lecture will provide basic definition of CRUD operations. Lecture 8, Doing CRUD with ASP.NET Web API. In this lecture we will learn how to implement CRUD operations with Web API. Lecture 9, What are OData query options? Here you will learn about OData query options in Web API. Lecture 10, Supporting OData query options in ASP.NET Web API. This lecture will demonstrate the usage of OData query options. Quiz 2, it's a learning evaluation quiz for the section. Section 3 has 6 lectures and a section quiz. Lecture 11, What is ASP.NET Web API Routing? In this lecture we will explain to you the Web API routing mechanism. Lecture 12, Routing in ASP.NET Web API. In this lecture we will implement API routing features. Lecture 13, What ASP.NET Web API Attribute Routing? Here you will get brief idea of attribute routing in Web API. Lecture 14, Attribute Routing in ASP.NET Web API. Lecture 14 will demonstrate attribute routing feature implementation. Lecture 15, What is Exception Handling? This lecture defines exception handling in Web API. Lecture 16, ASP.NET Web API and Exception Handling. You will see some examples of exception handling in Web API. And then you will have Quiz 3, Section 3 Learning Evaluation Quiz. Section 4 has 3 lectures and a section quiz. Lecture 17, Media Formatters in ASP.NET Web API. In this lecture we will learn about various media type formatters in Web API. Lecture 18, JSON and XML serialization in ASP.NET Web API. This lecture will demonstrate the usage of JSON and XML serialization in Web API. Lecture 19, BSON support in ASP.NET Web API 2.1. In this lecture you will learn about how Web APIs support BSON, binary JSON. Then you will have a quiz to evaluate you learning. Section 5 has 1 lectures and quiz. This section is about unit testing and debugging Web API service. Lecture 20, the lecture is about unit testing controllers in ASP.NET Web API. Then a quiz to evaluate your learning section. Section 6 is about ASP.NET Web API deployment and hosting and it has 2 lectures. Lecture 21, OWIN to self-host ASP.NET Web API. This lecture will teach you how to self-host a Web API. Lecture 22, Hosting ASP.NET Web API in IIS and EAS Express. In this lecture you learn about API hosting in IIS and IIS Express. Section 7 is about advanced topics like HTTPS and Web API. And then you will have final learning evaluation in 8th section. Thank for watching this video and see you in next lecture.